The maintenance tunnels beneath Nexus Station hummed with the steady rhythm of recycling systems and power conduits. Zara pressed her scaled back against the cool metal wall, listening for footsteps above. Her violet eyes darted toward the access panel she had just sealed, hiding the evidence of her unauthorized repairs to the water filtration system. She shouldn't be here. The Kethvar weren't supposed to work in technical areas anymore, not since the Galactic Council had reclassified their species as emotionally unstable following the incident on Kepler 7. That single moment of collective grief and rage had branded her entire people as dangerous, unreliable. Zara's webbed fingers trembled as she checked her scanner. The corridor above remained empty. Good. She could return to her assigned quarters in the waste management sector without anyone discovering her nighttime activities. It wasn't much, but keeping the station systems running properly gave her a purpose beyond scrubbing floors and emptying trash units. The Kethvar had once been celebrated engineers and architects, their amphibious nature allowing them to work in environments other species found challenging. Their cities beneath the oceans of their homeworld had been marvels of bioengineering, living structures that grew and adapted with the tides. Now those cities lay empty, their creators scattered across the galaxy as laborers and servants. Zara's reflection in the polished metal wall showed the telltale signs of her heritage. The subtle scaling along her neck and arms, the large eyes adapted for underwater vision, the gill slits that had long since sealed over in the dry station atmosphere. Her people had been beautiful once when they still had hope. She thought of Kelvon, her intended mate from before the exile. His touch had been gentle, his voice like the songs of deep ocean currents. They had planned to build a new reef city together, to raise young ones who would swim between the coral towers they would grow. But Kelvon had been on Kepler 7 when the humans arrived with their colonial charter, when the Kethvar delegation had watched their sacred spawning grounds bulldozed for a mining operation. The grief rage had taken them all simultaneously, a psychic explosion of loss that the other species had felt across 3 systems. In their anguish, several ships had malfunctioned, and 17 beings had died in the resulting accidents. The Galactic Council's response had been swift and merciless. The Kethvar were declared mentally unstable, their civilization dismantled, their people scattered. Kelvon had chosen death over dishonor, swimming into the deep trenches of their homeworld one last time. Many others had followed. Zara had wanted to join them, but something stubborn in her core had refused to surrender. She would endure, even if endurance meant spending her days cleaning the waste of species that now considered her kind little better than animals. The sound of approaching footsteps made her freeze, heavy, measured steps that echoed differently than the usual station security patrols. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows, hoping whoever it was would pass by the maintenance access without investigating. The footsteps stopped directly above her hiding spot. Zara held her breath, counting her heartbeats. 30 seconds passed, then 60. Just when she thought the visitor had moved on, she heard the soft whir of the access panel being activated. Someone was coming down. She gathered herself to run, but the tunnel stretched in both directions with no immediate exits. The scanner in her hands would mark her as definitely out of bounds, but abandoning it might lead to questions about how someone had been accessing restricted technical areas. Either way, she was caught. The figure that dropped into the tunnel wasn't wearing a security uniform. Instead, a human male in engineering coveralls landed with surprising grace, immediately scanning the area with professional interest, rather than suspicion. He was tall even for his species, with dark hair and skin weathered by what looked like outdoor work rather than the pale complexion of most station dwellers. Their eyes met across the narrow tunnel. Zara waited for the alarm, the shouts, the rough handling that would follow her discovery. Instead, the human's expression shifted from alertness to curiosity, then to something that looked almost like recognition. "You're the one who's been fixing the filtration system," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Zara's throat felt dry. She could lie, claim she was lost, but the scanner in her hands made that impossible. "I was just leaving." "Don't." He raised a hand peacefully. "I'm not here to report you. I'm Marcus Chen, the new head of engineering. I've been tracking these unauthorized repairs for weeks, trying to figure out who was doing such excellent work." The words hit her like a physical blow. Excellent work. When had anyone last said such a thing about something she had done? Marcus moved closer, his movements careful and non-threatening. The modifications to the biofilter array were particularly impressive. You managed to increase efficiency by 12%, using only standard components. Most engineers would have demanded specialty equipment to achieve half that improvement. It was simple optimization, Zara said, her voice barely audible. The original design was wasteful. Simple for someone who understands both biological and mechanical systems at an advanced level. Marcus studied her with genuine interest. Your species designed those living cities on your homeworld, didn't they? I studied the archived schematics during my engineering training. Absolutely brilliant work. Zara's hand moved unconsciously to her throat. No one mentioned her people's achievements anymore. Only their shame. That was before. Before doesn't erase the knowledge or the skill, Marcus said firmly. I've seen what you've done to keep this station running properly. The council assigns you to waste management. But you're out here every night making sure we don't die from system failures they're too incompetent to prevent. He gestured toward the modified access panel she'd been working on. This junction controls water flow to 3 residential sectors. Without your improvements, we'd have had contamination issues by now. You probably saved lives tonight. The words were too much. Zara felt her carefully maintained emotional barriers beginning to crack. I should go. Wait. Marcus reached into his toolkit and pulled out a small device she didn't recognize. I've been hoping to meet you. I have something to propose. Zara stopped, torn between fear and curiosity. Nothing good came from humans bearing proposals, but something in his voice made her hesitate. The station needs a proper chief maintenance engineer, Marcus continued. Someone who understands how these systems really work, not just how they're supposed to work according to outdated manuals. I can't offer you the title officially, not yet, but I can offer you real work. Important work. I'm classified as unstable, Zara said flatly. Regulations forbid. Regulations are written by politicians who've never held a hydrospanner, Marcus interrupted. I care about results. You want to fix things and I need things fixed. Seems like a natural partnership. For the first time in years, Zara felt something stir in her chest that wasn't pain or anger. It was small, fragile, but it felt dangerously close to hope. 3 weeks after their first meeting, Zara found herself standing in Engineering Bay 7, holding an official work tablet for the first time in 6 years. Marcus had somehow convinced Administrator Kellish to approve temporary technical consultation for critical repairs, though Zara suspected the administrator simply wanted to avoid explaining system failures to the council. The main atmospheric processor is making that noise again, Marcus said, gesturing toward the massive unit that hummed and wheezed in the center of the bay. 3rd time this month. Maintenance says they've checked it twice and found nothing wrong. Zara approached the processor, her trained senses already picking up subtle vibrations that spoke of impending failure. She placed her webbed palm against the housing and closed her eyes, feeling the rhythm of the machine through her bones. Bearing assembly in the tertiary fan, she said after a moment. The lubricant is breaking down faster than expected, probably due to contamination in the recycled air from Sector 12. Marcus consulted his tablet. Maintenance replaced that bearing last month, with the wrong specification. The replacement part has a lower temperature tolerance than the original. Zara moved to the control panel, fingers dancing over the display. The contamination is copper particulates from deteriorating wiring in the old residential blocks. When the bearing gets hot, the particulates bind with the lubricant and create an abrasive paste. She pulled up a diagnostic screen that made Marcus whistle softly. How did you know where to look for that data? The processor is designed to monitor 17 different parameters, but standard operating procedure only requires checks on 8. The other 9 are considered secondary diagnostics. Zara highlighted several readings that showed subtle but critical changes, secondary to beings who don't understand that all systems are interconnected. Marcus leaned over her shoulder to study the display, close enough that she could smell the distinctive human scent of his skin. It was strange but not unpleasant, carrying traces of metal and ozone from his work. Show me, he said simply. For the next hour, Zara guided him through the diagnostic systems, explaining how each reading connected to others, how patterns of seemingly minor fluctuations could predict major failures days or weeks in advance. Marcus listened intently, asking questions that revealed both his engineering knowledge and his willingness to learn from her expertise. This is incredible, he said finally. We've been treating symptoms instead of causes for years. How long would it take to set up proper predictive monitoring for all critical systems? If I had access to the main engineering database and 2 assistants who actually understood mechanical systems. Zara calculated quickly. 6 weeks for full implementation. Done. Marcus made notes on his tablet. I'll get you database access today. As for assistants, what do you need? Zara hesitated. Most species don't work well with Kethvar. We make them nervous. Most species haven't worked with you, Marcus corrected. Anyone who objects to working with the engineer who's keeping this station running can find another job. The casual way he said it, as if her competence was simply an obvious fact, made something warm unfurl in Zara's chest. When had anyone last defended her abilities instead of apologizing for her presence? A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Marcus frowned at his communicator, then handed it to Zara. It's for you. The message was from Supervisor Vex, her Rigelian overseer in waste management. His multifaceted eyes glittered with obvious displeasure on the small screen. Worker Zara will report to Waste Processing Sublevel 3 immediately. There has been contamination in the organic recycling units. You will personally clean and sterilize all affected equipment. The message cut off. Zara felt the familiar weight of resignation settling over her shoulders. I have to go. No, Marcus said firmly. You're assigned to critical engineering consultation. Waste management can handle their own problems. You don't understand. If I don't report, they'll file a disciplinary action. Too many of those and they can have me transferred off station. Zara's voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had fought this battle many times before. Vex has been looking for an excuse to get rid of me since I arrived. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as if he was chewing over words he wanted to say. Finally, he touched his communicator, Marcus Chen to Supervisor Vex. The Rigelian's image appeared, compound eyes shifting to focus on the human. Engineer Chen, I require the immediate return of my waste management worker. Worker Zara is currently assigned to critical engineering duties under emergency protocols, Marcus said smoothly. Her expertise is required for life support systems maintenance. I'm sure you understand that takes priority over routine cleaning. There is nothing routine about organic contamination. Vex's translator conveyed his indignation clearly. This could affect food production for the entire station. Then perhaps you should have properly maintained your equipment to prevent contamination in the first place. Marcus's tone remained professionally polite, but Zara caught the edge beneath it. I'll be filing a report with Administrator Kellish about the waste. Management Department's inability to handle standard maintenance without pulling. Emergency personnel from critical assignments. Vex's image sputtered for a moment before cutting off abruptly. Zara stared at Marcus in shock. You just made an enemy, she said quietly. I made it clear that you're under my authority now, not his. Marcus returned to the atmospheric processor as if the conversation had been routine. Vex is a middle manager who's built his career on bullying people who can't fight back. He won't risk a direct confrontation with someone who can cost him his position. But if something goes wrong, then I'll take responsibility. Marcus looked at her directly. Zara, you're the most skilled engineer on this station. I'm not going to waste that talent mopping floors because some bureaucrat thinks your species is dangerous. The words hit her like a physical shock. She had spent so long accepting the limitations others placed on her that someone refusing to accept them felt almost impossible to process. Why? She asked. Why are you doing this? Marcus paused in his calibration of the processor controls. Because it's right. Because this station needs your skills. Because everyone deserves the chance to do what they're good at. He glanced at her, then looked back at his work. And because I've seen what happens when good people are told they're worthless often enough. It's a waste I refuse to tolerate. The simple honesty in his voice made Zara's throat tight. She had spent years building walls around the parts of herself that could still be hurt. But Marcus seemed to walk through those defenses as if they didn't exist. I need to check the lubricant feed lines, she said, turning back to the processor to hide her reaction. Lead the way. As they worked together, Zara found herself stealing glances at her human partner. Marcus approached each task with careful attention, asking questions when he didn't understand something, offering insights when he spotted connections she might have missed. He treated her explanations with the same respect he might give a senior engineer's briefing. More importantly, he never once flinched when her scaled fingers brushed his while reaching for the same tool. never stepped back when her gill slits fluttered open in concentration, never showed the subtle signs of discomfort that most other species displayed around her kind. For the first time in years, Zara allowed herself to imagine what it might feel like to work as an engineer again, to be valued for her mind instead of tolerated for her labor. The thought was terrifying and wonderful at the same time. When they finished the repairs, the atmospheric processor hummed with smooth efficiency, its vibrations now steady and healthy. Marcus ran the diagnostics twice, nodding with satisfaction at the readings. "Perfect," he said. "Want to tackle the water reclamation system next? I have a feeling it's got similar issues." Zara found herself smiling, an expression that felt strange after so much disuse. "I thought you might say that." The hydroponics lab had been abandoned for 2 months when Zara first discovered it. Equipment failures and contamination had forced the closure of Bay 15, leaving behind rows of empty growing tanks and dead nutrient lines. It had become her refuge during off-duty hours, a place where she could work in solitude without drawing unwanted attention. She was calibrating a water pH sensor when Marcus found her there. 3 days after the atmospheric processor repair, he stood in the doorway, taking in the partially restored facility with obvious surprise. "I've been looking for you," he said. "Your shift ended an hour ago." "The nutrient pumps needed adjustment," Zara replied without looking up from her work. "The previous technicians miscalibrated the mineral ratios. The plants were dying from iron deficiency." Marcus moved deeper into the lab, examining the neat rows of equipment she had restored to working condition. Green shoots were already emerging from several growing tanks, the first new life the facility had seen in months. Administrator Kellish said this lab was beyond repair. He was planning to strip it for parts. The equipment is functional. The contamination was traced to a single failed valve that was allowing sewage backflow into the nutrient system. Once that was isolated and replaced, standard sterilization protocols cleared the contamination. Zara gestured toward the growing tanks. "The facility can support food production for 40% of the station's population." "That's incredible." Marcus knelt beside one of the tanks, watching tiny seedlings push through their growing medium. "How long have you been working on this?" 4 weeks. I work here after my assigned shifts." Zara finally looked at him. "I know I should have reported the restoration to administration, but I wanted to ensure it was fully functional before Kellish could find reasons to shut it down again," Marcus finished. "Smart thinking." He stood and walked the length of the facility, examining her work with the same careful attention he brought to engineering problems. Zara found herself watching his expressions, trying to read his assessment of her efforts. "This isn't just repair work," he said finally. "You've improved the entire system. These efficiency upgrades would cost the station thousands of credits if they hired outside contractors. The original design was inefficient. Plants don't grow in isolated systems in nature. Everything connects." Zara indicated the modified nutrient cycling system she had installed. "The waste from fish tanks provides fertilizer for the plants. The plants filter the water for the fish. The whole system balances itself with minimal external input. Biological integration." Marcus nodded slowly. "Like the living cities your people built." The mention of her homeworld sent a familiar stab of loss through Zara's chest. She turned back to the pH sensor to hide her reaction, but Marcus had apparently seen something in her expression. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to bring up painful memories." "It's not painful to remember good things," Zara said after a moment. "It's painful to remember that they're gone." Marcus was quiet, giving her space to continue or change the subject. The simple respect for her emotional boundaries was something she had rarely experienced from other species. "We called them reef cities," she said eventually. "Living structures that grew from modified coral organisms, shaped by our songs and tended by our biotechnology. They were beautiful. What happened to them?" Zara's hand stilled on the sensor controls. "When the council declared us emotionally unstable, they quarantined our homeworld. No trade, no communication, no outside support. The cities needed constant tending, songs to guide their growth, biotechnology to prevent collapse." She turned away from her work entirely, moving to stare out the lab's small viewport at the stars beyond. "The last transmission we received was 3 years ago. A few elders singing the death songs to let the cities return to the sea peacefully. By now there's probably nothing left but empty reefs." Marcus joined her at the viewport, close enough that she could feel his warmth in the cool lab air. I'm sorry for what happened to your people. Most species view it as necessary. Zara's voice carried the weariness of someone who had heard too many justifications. We were dangerous, they say. Our grief was too powerful, too uncontrolled. Better to scatter us than risk another incident. Grief isn't dangerous. It's natural. Marcus's voice carried an unexpected intensity. What happened on Kepler 7 was a tragedy, but it wasn't malicious. Your people were mourning the destruction of something sacred. Zara looked at him in surprise. Most beings preferred not to discuss the incident at all, treating it like a shameful secret. You've studied what happened? I've read every available report. The humans who destroyed your spawning grounds weren't supposed to be there. They ignored the protected status because they thought aquatic species wouldn't fight back effectively. Marcus's jaw tightened. They were wrong, but not in the way they expected. 17 beings died when our ships malfunctioned, because your entire delegation was overwhelmed by collective psychic trauma. No one expected that level of neural connection between individuals. Marcus turned to face her fully. It was an accident born from tragedy, not an attack. The Council didn't see it that way. The Council was wrong. The flat certainty in his voice surprised her. I've worked with representatives from 47 different species. Most of them are decent beings, but they're also cautious to the point of paralysis. They chose the safe option instead of the right one. Zara felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of tension she had carried for so long she had forgotten it was there. You really believe that? I've seen what you can do when someone trusts you with important work. If that's what dangerous looks like, then the galaxy needs more dangerous beings. The words hung in the air between them, simple and honest and completely at odds with everything Zara had been told about herself for years. She found herself studying Marcus's face, looking for signs of deception or ulterior motive and finding none. Why did you become an engineer? She asked suddenly. Broken things offend me, Marcus said with a slight smile. Whether it's a faulty life support system or an unjust policy, I can't stand watching things that should work properly fail because no one wants to put in the effort to fix them. And you think I'm something that needs fixing? I think you're something that was broken by others and deserves the chance to be whole again. His expression grew serious. But that's not why I sought you out for this partnership. I wanted to work with you because you're brilliant at what you do. The simple honesty of it made Zara's throat tight. She had spent so long being defined by what she was, Kethvar, exile, waste worker, that someone seeing her for what she could do felt revolutionary. The hydroponics lab needs official approval to resume operations, she said finally. Leave that to me. I'll present the restoration as a successful efficiency test for new biotechnology applications. Marcus grinned. Kalish loves anything that makes him look innovative to the Council. And if he asks who designed the improvements, I'll tell him the truth. That the best engineer on the station figured out how to save us 40,000 credits in food imports while creating a self-sustaining ecosystem that could serve as a model for other facilities. Zara felt heat rise in her scaled cheeks. Praise still felt foreign, like clothing that didn't quite fit properly. You have too much faith in my abilities. I have exactly as much faith as your results justify. Marcus moved toward the exit, then paused. Are you hungry? I was about to get some food, and I'd like to hear more about biological integration systems. It was a casual invitation, the kind colleagues might extend to each other without thinking twice. But Zara couldn't remember the last time anyone had invited her to share a meal, much less asked to continue a conversation about her work. She hesitated, unused to social interaction beyond professional necessity. Nothing formal, Marcus said, apparently reading her uncertainty. Just the station cafeteria and talk about engineering. I promise not to ask any more painful questions about your past. You can ask, Zara said quietly. I'm not used to anyone wanting to hear the answers. Then we'll take it as slowly as you want. Marcus smiled, and Zara found herself noticing how the expression changed his entire face, making him look younger and more approachable. Come on. I want to know how you got the mineral cycling so perfectly balanced. As they left the hydroponics lab together, Zara caught herself walking a little straighter, her usual defensive posture relaxing for the first time in memory. The corridors of the station looked somehow different when she wasn't hurrying through them alone, trying to avoid notice. For the first time in 6 years, she was looking forward to a conversation. The emergency alarm shattered the quiet of the night shift, its harsh tone echoing through the engineering sections. Zara was out of her quarters and running toward the source before the second pulse finished sounding. Years of exile hadn't dulled her instincts when critical systems failed. She found Marcus in Engineering Bay 2, surrounded by smoking control panels and the acrid smell of burned circuitry. His face was grim as he worked frantically at a backup console, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. "Primary power grid failure," he said without looking up from his controls. "Something hit the main distribution center. We're running on emergency power, but it won't last more than 6 hours." Zara moved to the central display, her fingers flying over the diagnostic controls. The readings made her heart sink. This isn't a simple failure. Someone sabotaged the primary coupling array. "I was hoping you wouldn't say that." Marcus pulled up the security feeds from the power center. The images showed a figure in maintenance coveralls moving purposefully through the facility, placing small devices at critical junction points. The saboteur knew exactly where to strike for maximum damage. "Can you identify them?" The recording system was damaged in the initial blast. "But look at this." Marcus highlighted the timestamp. The sabotage happened during shift change when that area would be temporarily unmonitored. Zara studied the patterns of damage, her mind automatically calculating repair sequences. "We need to bypass the damaged couplings and reroute power through the secondary grid. But the secondary system isn't designed to handle full station load. How long do we have before life support fails?" 4 hours until oxygen recycling shuts down. 6 until water purification stops. Zara was already moving toward the tool lockers. "We need access to the primary power center to attempt repairs. The center is flooded with radiation from the damaged coupling array. Exposure would be lethal for most species, but not for Kethvar." Zara pulled on a radiation suit, checking the seals carefully. "Our scaled skin provides natural resistance, and our gill slits can be sealed to prevent internal contamination." Marcus caught her arm as she headed for the exit. "Zara, wait. Even with natural resistance, prolonged exposure could cause permanent damage. The alternative is watching everyone on this station suffocate slowly." She met his eyes steadily. "This is what I trained for. Let me do my job." For a moment, Marcus looked like he wanted to argue. Then his expression shifted to resignation mixed with admiration. "What do you need from me?" "Monitor the power grid from here. Guide me to the most critical damage points first." Zara secured her helmet. "And Marcus? If the radiation levels spike beyond safe parameters, seal the power center. Don't risk the station trying to save me." "That's not happening." His voice carried absolute conviction. "I'm not leaving you in there alone." The power center was a maze of twisted metal and sparking cables when Zara entered. Her radiation detector clicked steadily, but the levels remained within her tolerance range. She activated her communicator. "I'm inside. Beginning assessment of the primary coupling array." Marcus's voice crackled through the static. "First priority is the main distribution hub, Section 7 Alpha. The damage there is cascading through the entire grid." Zara worked her way through the debris, following the path of destruction. The saboteur had been thorough and knowledgeable, targeting systems that would create maximum chaos with minimal effort. This wasn't random vandalism. "Marcus, these aren't simple explosive charges. Someone used sonic disruptors to shatter the crystal matrix in the coupling cores. That's advanced technology, and it requires detailed knowledge of station power systems. Sonic disruptors? Those are restricted military hardware. And the saboteur knew exactly how to use them." Zara reached the main distribution hub, whistling softly at the destruction. The entire coupling array had been reduced to glittering fragments. "This is going to take hours to repair, and we need replacement parts we don't have. Can you bypass it?" Zara studied the twisted wreckage, her mind racing through possibilities. "Maybe. If I can reroute power through the auxiliary lines and use the backup coupling matrix as a primary feed." She trailed off, calculations spinning through her head. "Zara? What is it?" "The backup matrix isn't designed for this kind of load. It'll hold for maybe an hour before it burns out." She moved to the auxiliary control panel, already beginning to strip away damaged components. "But an hour might be enough if we can get the secondary grid online simultaneously. That would require precise timing and coordination between multiple systems. Then, we better not make any mistakes." For the next 2 hours, Zara worked in the radioactive environment, while Marcus coordinated repairs throughout the station. They fell into a rhythm of communication and cooperation that felt natural despite the crisis. Marcus anticipated her needs, having replacement parts ready before she asked. Zara trusted his guidance through the complex power grid, knowing he could see patterns she couldn't access from her position. Backup matrix is in position, she reported, sweat streaming down her face inside the helmet. Beginning power transfer on your mark. Secondary grid shows green across all sectors. Transfer in 3, 2, 1, mark. Power hummed through the restored systems and the emergency lighting shifted to normal illumination throughout the station. Zara felt a wave of relief as her radiation detector showed decreasing levels. Primary life support is back online, Marcus announced. You did it, Zara. She was removing her helmet when Marcus appeared in the power center entrance, still wearing his own radiation gear. He looked around at the repairs with obvious amazement. I told you not to risk exposure, Zara said. But her protest lacked heat. She was too tired and too relieved to maintain proper indignation. You've been in here for 3 hours. I wanted to make sure you were all right. Marcus helped her strip away the bulky radiation suit. How do you feel? Like I've been wrestling with broken machinery in a radioactive environment for 3 hours. Zara stretched muscles stiff from prolonged work in the awkward suit. But alive, which is better than the alternative. Marcus's hands lingered on her shoulders as he helped with the suit fastenings, and Zara found herself very aware of his proximity. The adrenaline of the crisis was fading, leaving behind a different kind of awareness. We make a good team, he said quietly. We do. She looked up at him, noting the exhaustion in his face and the genuine relief in his eyes. Marcus, about the sabotage. Whoever did this had detailed knowledge of station systems and access to military-grade equipment. I know. I've been thinking about that too. His expression darkened. This wasn't random. Someone wanted to cause maximum disruption, and they knew exactly how to do it. Who has that level of system access? Senior engineering staff, security personnel, a few administrators. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. The problem is that most of those beings have been here for years. Why would they suddenly turn saboteur? Zara considered the question while they walked back toward the main engineering section. Maybe they didn't. What if the saboteur was someone who gained access recently? You mean someone like me? Marcus's voice carried a note of dark humor. I did arrive just a few weeks before these problems started. Or someone who's been manipulating access codes and using their knowledge of staff patterns to avoid detection. Zara stopped walking, struck by a sudden thought. Marcus, you said the sabotage happened during shift change. Right, when that section would be unmonitored. But someone had to know about the shift change timing. That information isn't public knowledge. Zara felt pieces clicking together in her mind. Whoever did this has been studying our routines, learning our weaknesses. Marcus's expression grew grim. Which means this probably isn't over. If they failed to cripple the station with this attack, they'll try again. The thought sent a chill through Zara that had nothing to do with the cooling air around them. They had saved the station tonight, but at the cost of revealing just how vulnerable they really were. We need to upgrade security protocols, she said. Agreed. But first, we both need rest. Marcus looked at her with concern. You've been exposed to radiation for hours. You should report to medical for a full scan. Kethavar physiology handles radiation differently than most species. I'll be fine after some sleep. Zara hesitated, then added, But thank you for caring about my welfare. Of course I care. The simplicity of the statement caught her off guard. You're important to this station. You're important to me. The words hung in the air between them, carrying implications that neither seemed quite ready to address directly. Zara felt her heart's beating faster. But whether from residual adrenaline or something else entirely, she wasn't sure. I should let you get some rest, Marcus said finally. Yes. Long day ahead tomorrow. Zara turned toward her quarters, then looked back. Marcus, good work tonight. We saved a lot of lives. We did. His smile was tired but genuine. Sleep well, Zara. As she walked away, Zara found herself replaying the events of the night. Not just the crisis itself, but the easy partnership she and Marcus had maintained throughout. He trusted her skills absolutely, valued her input, treated her as an equal colleague despite all the social barriers that should have prevented such cooperation. More than that, He had risked radiation exposure simply to see. The message arrived during the morning shift change, broadcast simultaneously to every communication device on the station. Administrator Kellish's voice carried barely concealed panic as he announced the emergency assembly in the main docking bay. Zara arrived to find chaos. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species crowded together, their voices creating a cacophony of fear and confusion. She spotted Marcus near the engineering section and made her way through the crowd toward him. "What's happening?" she asked, having to raise her voice over the noise. "Galactic Council inspection team," Marcus replied grimly. "Unscheduled arrival in 6 hours. They're coming to investigate security concerns and unauthorized personnel assignments." Zara felt her heart sink. Unauthorized personnel assignments could only mean one thing. Someone had reported her elevation to engineering duties. Supervisor Vex? Most likely. Although it could be anyone who objects to recent changes in station management. Marcus's jaw was tight with controlled anger. The timing isn't coincidental. Someone wanted maximum disruption. Administrator Kellish's voice cut through the crowd noise. "All personnel will return to original duty assignments immediately. Any unauthorized modifications to station systems will be reversed within 4 hours. Department heads will prepare full reports on all recent activities for council review." The announcement sent Zara's world crashing down around her. Original duty assignments meant waste management. Reversal of unauthorized modifications meant destroying everything she had built in hydroponics and environmental systems. 4 hours to erase weeks of meaningful work. "This is my fault," she said quietly. "I should have stayed hidden, kept my head down. This is not your fault." Marcus's voice carried steel. "This is someone using bureaucratic terrorism to maintain their own power." Around them, beings were dispersing to comply with Kellish's orders. Zara watched her fellow workers avoiding eye contact. The same instinct for self-preservation that had kept her alive during 6 years of exile. No one wanted to be associated with the trouble she had brought. "I need to go," she said. "If I report back to waste management and keep quiet, maybe the council will overlook the irregularities." "Absolutely not." Marcus caught her arm as she turned to leave. "We're not giving them what they want. Marcus, be practical. I'm expendable. You have a career, a future. Don't sacrifice that for someone like me. Someone like you." His eyes flashed with genuine anger. "Someone brilliant enough to save this entire station from multiple system failures. Someone dedicated enough to work unpaid overtime maintaining critical infrastructure. Someone brave enough to walk into a radioactive environment to save lives. Someone classified as emotionally unstable by the Galactic Council," Zara said flatly. "Someone whose presence here violates multiple regulations regarding dangerous species. Whose classification is based on one traumatic incident that wasn't even criminal." Marcus moved closer, lowering his voice. "Zara, in 6 weeks of working together, I've seen you handle pressure, solve complex problems, and risk your life for others. If that's what instability looks like, then the Council's definition is worthless." His words made something ache in her chest, but practical reality couldn't be ignored. "It doesn't matter what either of us believes. The Council has authority here. Then we change what they see when they arrive." Zara looked at him in confusion.
"What do you mean?"
Marcus was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Then his face set in determined lines. "The Council is investigating unauthorized personnel assignments and system modifications. What if the modifications weren't unauthorized? I don't understand." "Administrator Kellish signed off on your temporary engineering consultation. That consultation has been successful enough to warrant permanent assignment." Marcus pulled out his communicator. "I'm going to recommend you for formal promotion to Assistant Chief Engineer." Zara stared at him in shock. "Marcus, that's impossible. The regulations don't specifically prohibit Kethvar from engineering positions. They just make it difficult through bureaucratic barriers." Marcus was already composing messages on his device. "If I can present your work as essential to station operations, backed by concrete performance data and cost savings, the Council will have to evaluate you on merit rather than species classification. And if they refuse, then I make it clear that my continued service as Chief Engineer depends on having the staff I need to keep this station running safely." Marcus looked up from his communicator. "They can accept you as Assistant Chief Engineer, or they can explain to their superiors why they forced the resignation of the only engineer who successfully prevented major system failures here. The audacity of the plan made Zara dizzy. "You'd risk your career for this?" "I'd risk my career for the right thing." "There's a difference." Marcus touched her shoulder gently. "Zara, you deserve this position based on your abilities. I'm not doing you a favor, I'm fixing an injustice." Before she could respond, Marcus was striding toward the administrative section, leaving her standing alone in the emptying docking bay. The other station personnel avoided looking at her as they passed, but she could feel their awareness of her presence, their nervous energy about what the council inspection might bring. For the next 4 hours, Zara tried to work in waste management while her mind raced with possibilities and fears. Supervisor Vex assigned her to the most unpleasant tasks with obvious satisfaction. Clearly believing her brief elevation was over, she scrubbed contaminated equipment and hauled refuse containers while trying not to think about hydroponic systems being shut down or engineering projects being abandoned. Then, Marcus appeared in the waste management facility, his expression carefully neutral but his eyes bright with barely contained energy. "Worker Zara, report to Administrator Kellish's office immediately," he announced formally. Vex's compound eyes narrowed with suspicion. "On whose authority?" "Mine. She's needed for preparation of engineering reports prior to council inspection." Marcus handed him an official-looking document. Temporary reassignment authorization, signed by Administrator Kellish. Zara followed Marcus through the corridors in confused silence, afraid to ask questions until they were alone. When they reached a quiet section near the administrative levels, she finally spoke. "What did you do?" "Exactly what I said I would. I presented Administrator Kellish with a detailed analysis of your contributions to station operations, backed by performance data and cost-benefit projections." Marcus smiled grimly. "I also mentioned that several other engineering positions throughout the sector have been seeking qualified candidates, and that your skills would be valued elsewhere if the station couldn't properly utilize them." He believed you? He believed the numbers. 40,000 credits in saved food costs from hydroponics restoration, 60,000 in prevented equipment replacement from your predictive maintenance programs, 12 hours of prevented life support failure from the power grid repairs. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. "Kellish might be bureaucratic, but he's not stupid. He knows what you're worth." They had reached the administrative offices. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Zara could see various department heads scurrying around with tablet computers and worried expressions. The atmosphere of barely controlled panic was palpable. "Marcus, what if this doesn't work? What if the council rejects the promotion? Then we deal with that when it happens." He studied her face carefully. "Are you afraid of the position or afraid of hoping for it?" The question hit closer to home than she wanted to admit. "Both. The position you can handle. I've seen your work." Marcus moved closer, his voice growing gentler. "As for hope, sometimes taking a risk is the only way to discover what's possible." Before Zara could respond, Administrator Kellish appeared in his office doorway, beckoning them inside. The next hour passed in a blur of forms, interviews, and bureaucratic procedures. Kellish was nervous but determined, clearly convinced that presenting Zara's promotion as a done deal was his best defense against council criticism. "The promotion is effective immediately," Kellish announced finally. "Assistant Chief Engineer Zara will be responsible for environmental systems, hydroponics operations, and predictive maintenance protocols." Zara found herself holding an official identification badge with her new title, the physical proof of what felt like an impossible dream. Assistant Chief Engineer. Not waste management worker, not temporary consultant, but an actual position of responsibility and respect. "The council inspection team will want to interview you about your qualifications and duties," Kellish continued. "Chief Engineer Chen will brief you on appropriate responses." As they left the administrative office, Marcus was quietly satisfied while Zara felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. Her hands shook slightly as she examined the identification badge. "I can't believe this is real," she said. "It's real, and you've earned it." Marcus guided her toward the engineering section. "Now we need to prepare for the inspection. The council representatives will test your knowledge and credentials thoroughly. What if I fail their tests? You won't. But even if you do, at least we'll have tried." Marcus stopped in the corridor and looked at her seriously. "Zara, regardless of what happens with the council, I want you to know something. Working with UT, The council inspection team consisted of 3 beings whose presence dominated the conference room through sheer authority. Counselor Thex, a Ragelian whose compound eyes missed no detail. Counselor Vorthak, a Centaurian whose telepathic abilities made lying impossible. And Counselor Jung, a human whose reputation for strict adherence to regulations was legendary throughout the sector. Zara sat across from them at the polished table, acutely aware that her entire future depended on the next hour. Marcus sat beside her, officially present as her department head but really there for moral support that meant more than he could know. Assistant Chief Engineer Zara, Counselor Thex began, her mechanical voice translator conveying disapproval. Your recent promotion raises several concerns. According to our records, you were previously classified for basic labor assignments only. That classification was based on outdated assessments that didn't account for my actual capabilities, Zara replied, keeping her voice steady. My work performance over the past 6 weeks demonstrates competence in advanced engineering applications. Counselor Vorthak leaned forward, his mental probes pressing against her consciousness with uncomfortable familiarity. Your species has been deemed emotionally unstable following the Kepler-7 incident. How do you respond to concerns about your psychological fitness for critical infrastructure responsibilities? The question struck at her deepest fears, but Zara had prepared for this moment. The Kepler-7 incident resulted from collective psychic trauma, experienced by an entire delegation, witnessing the destruction of sacred sites. Individual Kethavar working in controlled environments do not exhibit the same neural resonance patterns. My psychological evaluations from 6 years of station work show consistent emotional stability. Psychological evaluations conducted by whom? Counselor Jung asked, speaking for the first time. His human features showed the same neutral professionalism Zara had seen in Marcus, but without the warmth. Station medical staff, as required for all personnel in sensitive positions, Marcus interjected. Assistant Chief Engineer Zara has maintained perfect psychological ratings throughout her assignment here. Counselor Thex consulted her tablet. Yet these evaluations were conducted while she was assigned to waste management, not engineering. The stress levels and decision-making requirements are significantly different, which is why I requested comprehensive performance evaluation during her temporary engineering consultation, Marcus said smoothly. The results exceeded expectations for any species. Counselor Vorthak's mental pressure intensified, and Zara felt him probing for signs of instability or deception. She held her emotional barrier steady, projecting calm competence despite the invasive examination. Show us your work, Counselor Jung said suddenly. Not reports or assessments. Direct demonstration of engineering capability. For the next 2 hours, the council representatives subjected Zara to the most thorough technical examination of her life. They had her diagnose complex system failures from incomplete data, design efficiency improvements for theoretical scenarios, and explain her decision-making process for emergency repairs. Through it all, Marcus provided quiet support, offering clarification when needed but allowing Zara to demonstrate her abilities independently. She found herself drawing confidence from his presence, the knowledge that someone believed in her worth, making it easier to project that confidence to others. The turning point came when Counselor Vorthak asked about the power grid sabotage incident. As Zara explained her analysis of the damage patterns and her improvised repair strategy, she noticed all 3 counselors leaning forward with genuine interest. You identified the saboteur's use of sonic disruptors based solely on the pattern of crystal matrix damage? Counselor Thex asked. The fracture patterns were distinctive. Random explosive damage creates irregular breaks, but sonic weapons create harmonic fractures that follow crystal structure lines. Zara pulled up the diagnostic images on the room's display. The saboteur had advanced knowledge of both the equipment and the weapons needed to destroy it efficiently. Have you identified suspects? Counselor Jung inquired. Several possibilities based on required access levels and technical knowledge, Marcus replied. We're still investigating. Counselor Vorthak suddenly straightened, his mental probes shifting to scan the room beyond their immediate group. Speaking of investigation, we should discuss Supervisor Vex's complaint about unauthorized personnel assignments. What specifically was his complaint? Marcus asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. That a dangerous individual was given access to critical systems without proper authorization, endangering station safety. Counselor Thex read from her tablet. He expressed particular concern about emotional instability and the risk of sabotage. Zara felt cold understanding wash over her. He thinks I'm the saboteur, are you? Counselor Vorthak asked bluntly, his mental probes pressing deep. No. Zara met his gaze directly, allowing him full access to her thoughts and memories. I've dedicated my life to maintaining and improving these systems, not destroying them. The telepathic examination continued for long minutes while the other counselors waited. Finally, Vorthak leaned back with what looked like surprise. She's telling the truth. More than that, she's incapable of the kind of deliberate destruction we witnessed. Her emotional connection to proper system function is too strong. Then who is our saboteur? Counselor Jung asked. Marcus and Zara exchanged glances. They had been developing their own theories, but hadn't expected to share them with the council inspection team. Someone with intimate knowledge of station operations and access to restricted equipment, Zara said carefully. The sabotage was too precisely targeted to be random. We've been analyzing access logs and duty schedules, Marcus added. The saboteur had to know exactly when various areas would be unmonitored. Counselor Thex was consulting her tablet again, cross-referencing data with obvious efficiency. Supervisor Vex had the required access levels and scheduling knowledge. He also filed complaints about unauthorized system modifications 3 days before the sabotage occurred. Are you suggesting Vex sabotaged the station to frame me? Zara asked. I'm suggesting his complaint about dangerous personnel may have been projection, Counselor Jung said grimly. Someone covering their own crimes by directing suspicion elsewhere. The pieces clicked together in Zara's mind with horrible clarity. Vex's hostility toward her promotion, his insistence on maintaining strict species hierarchies, his access to both the power systems and the duty schedules needed for effective sabotage. He would have known about my radiation resistance, she said quietly, known that I would be the most likely candidate to attempt repairs in the contaminated environment. A plan to eliminate you while appearing to frame you for the original crime, Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Efficient and cruel, Counselor Vorthak stood abruptly. We need to locate Supervisor Vex immediately. If he realizes his sabotage failed to achieve its goals, he may attempt additional attacks. The next hour passed in controlled chaos as station security searched for Vex while the council representatives coordinated their investigation. Zara found herself at the center of the action, her knowledge of station systems crucial for predicting where the saboteur might strike next. It was Marcus who finally identified the pattern. He's targeting life support systems in order of decreasing redundancy, he announced as they studied the sabotage locations on a station schematic. First power, then atmospheric processing, next would be water reclamation. They found Vex in the water treatment facility, preparing to introduce contaminants into the main supply lines. The confrontation was brief but decisive, station security overwhelming him before he could complete his destructive work. As they watched Vex being led away in restraints, Zara felt a complex mix of vindication and sadness. Another being's hatred and fear had nearly destroyed everything she had worked to build. The charges against you are obviously dismissed, Counselor Jung said as they returned to the conference room. More importantly, your promotion to Assistant Chief Engineer is confirmed based on demonstrated competence and dedication to station safety. Thank you, Zara managed, still processing the rapid change in her circumstances. However, Counselor Thex added, this incident raises questions about current personnel evaluation procedures. We recommend comprehensive review of all species classifications and duty assignments. Counselor Vorthak nodded agreement. The Kethvar classification as emotionally unstable appears to be based on insufficient data and cultural misunderstanding. We'll be recommending policy revisions to the full council. The formal proceedings concluded an hour later, with Zara holding official confirmation of her engineering position and a commendation for her role in exposing the sabotage plot. As the council representatives departed, she found herself alone with Marcus in the empty conference room. It's over, she said, still hardly believing it. The investigation is over. The rest is just beginning. Marcus moved closer, his expression serious but warm. Zara, there's something I need to tell you. She looked at him expectantly, her heart's beating faster at his proximity and the intensity in his voice. What happened today, what you've accomplished, it's not just about engineering or regularity.